Well, we have a quorum, so let's get started. Maybe Lou will sign on in a minute. It's nice to see everybody. I do like seeing faces. It's more fun than the town meeting, only seeing a couple people. But so I wanted to switch it up a little bit and just start off with the town meeting and find out how people participated. I heard, Bob, a couple people thought that it went well. Anybody have any problems or concerns?
Well,
I got a meeting packet, but I got it yesterday.
Oops.
I don't know if anybody else had that experience.
Well,
but
Jeff
I didn't get one at all.
Jeff emailed me. The thing is, if you're a town meeting member, you get it. And I knew you weren't, so I called Lynn maybe the week before and asked her if she would mail packets to both of you, but they were also on the town website. And unfortunately, the next time, if we keep meeting like this, you might need to download it and review it from there because.
but the part I just wanted to point out, it was sort of weird that it was postmarked the 15th of June. And I got it yesterday.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
They must have used an old thing. Yeah. I know I did ask, but they're not obligated to mail it out unless you're a town meeting member. So maybe she didn't get to it. I'm not sure. She was willing to do it, but she did tell me that it was on the town website. So that's why I told you both to do that. And I knew that they were going to identify you as finance committee, not town meeting, because you wouldn't have been able to vote. So that was one concern. Any other concerns, Beppy?
Now, I don't want to really say a concern. First of all, I thought she did a fabulous job. I was very impressed, and I'm sorry the check-in time took a long time, but I think the way it was done, it probably prevented a little grandstanding because nobody knew who was, it wasn't somebody standing up and just, okay, I'm going to go talk for 25 minutes. I'm going to get up again. So at least I didn't feel that. And I've been to a couple of town meetings. I felt there is a little grandstanding. I really liked the discussion. I know this might make a couple of you unhappy, but I liked the discussion about the youth advocate.
Yeah.
I liked the discussion because people were talking about finally what was important to them. And I think we've been wondering what is important to the town, although it wasn't clearly representative of everybody, but they did talk about this is important. And this, maybe the reason that so many kids are hanging out in certain areas is because we don't have this position and maybe we should be paying some attention to it. And they also said, just because other towns don't have it doesn't mean we shouldn't. And I liked that kind of independent thought because it gave to me some latitude of looking at some other areas that are basically, we do that, we have this many of these because every town has this per thousand. And I don't think that's necessarily how you should allocate your resources. So I liked the discussion. I don't know whether it really provided a real opening, but it was an opening to me.
Okay, Bob?
Yeah, on the youth advocate, one of the problems with the Zoom meeting was I needed a chance to reply to some of the things that people said, and they closed out the discussion. And if I had been on the stage, I would have said something to Melissa because I had some replies to some of the things that were said, and I was hitting the sign to go, but then they went into the thing, so that was kind of the downside. And because they had our write-up on what it was, and I had some other things that I wanted to bring up, but I just felt that this whole thing started, as far as I was concerned, when I was looking. I really looked at and I said, this town needs a senior advocate, probably 10 times more than they need a youth advocate. And the reason I say that is the senior advocates have nothing. They have nothing. And the schools have psychologists, social workers, physical therapists, and guidance counselors and things like that. So there's a lot of resources there. And I called Melissa and I said, what was the final count? And the final vote on it was 103 to 54. So it was 2 out of 1 preferred it. So there were a lot of emotional pleas, but statistics or anything like that, or a real need for it, I still don't understand it. I mean, you can, 10 people can say that we need it, but I'd like to know what we need it for. And I think a town, flexibility wise, as time goes on, the town has different requirements, and I don't think we're meeting those requirements. And when you think about it, the salary is $70,000, with benefits is $90,000. So if you hire somebody for, and they work the job 30 years, you're almost $3 million. And then you got retirement benefits that, for life and their spouse, as far as medical goes. So now you're approaching $4 million. So, serious consideration for an expenditure like that, when I think we need a senior advocate much more. I think it's lacking. But the other thing, once I get into it, one of the things that I found interesting was, I think this is the first time we challenged anything. The Finance Committee has really challenged this whole situation. And, it was an interesting test to see how it evolved and what the final results were. Obviously, the select board voted against the youth advocate 3-2. And, one of that third vote was there because they had, when they were in contract negotiations, they used the savings from the youth advocate position to justify the contracts. And so next year I would like to have the youth advocate do a presentation.
Whose phone is ringing? Can I ask them to mute?
It's mine, but I can't mute it.
Okay, all right.
It's my it's on my cell phone. It's my house phone.
That's okay.
Sorry.
Gloria,
So a few things from town meeting.
can you turn your mic up or something, Gloria? Your volume?
Up?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, soft.
All right. So a few things from town meeting. If you hit, raise your hand, and then you're kind of in a queue, right? So she can see you, the moderator can see who's got their hand raised. But then if someone calls the question, that's it. Like, nobody else can see how many people still have their hand raised. They could be calling a question, but you could have 20 people with their hand raised. You don't know, because that happened to me with that youth advocate situation. The other thing was Article 19. I don't know why that got withdrawn, because when the presentation was given to us by Ms. O'Grady, she made it sound like we needed to do this and approve it before July, or else the flood insurance, homeowners might lose the National Flood Insurance Program. I was all confused, like why that got withdrawn. And I, was going to see if maybe Greg tonight could explain that to us.
Okay.
But in any event, there was something else, but it'll come to me.
Janine, did you have your hand up?
I did. I just wanted to expand on what Bob said, that I think, everybody knows here, I was also against the youth advocate position. I think a lot of it, the folks were basing it on emotion, not practicality, because, tonight when I was listening to the news as an example, they were talking about the impact that it's going to have on the schools, as an example, when they open in the fall, with all the changes that they have to make, and it could increase their budgets by 20%. So it doesn't seem to be, we have to be very, very conscious of how we're spending money, if that indeed is the case for Dartmouth. And we don't know what the impacts would be on other line items.
So I want to say that, being on the Finance Committee is interesting, because I think when we come here, we do have ideas about what the priorities are, just maybe from our own experience, or, experience in the town or elsewhere. And it's tricky because I found myself, so with the youth advocate, I definitely have an opinion. I voted to leave things as they were because of the process more than the need for the position. And I think I have really good reasons for not supporting the youth advocate, but that and $1.25 will get me a cup of coffee. It doesn't really matter what I think about that as much as what our role as a finance committee is. And it's difficult because there are other areas of the budget that I look at and say, really, do we really need that? And we can talk about that as a finance committee, and we can ask for facts from people, and then we formulate our opinions. But in terms of the priorities, that's where you run for select board, because when you're a select board member, you're kind of deciding where you're going with that. I think we did a very good job of expressing everybody's point of view on that in particular. I agree, Janine, with what you said, and Bob, what you said about it being more of an emotional argument. And I'm not sure that it was representative. I think that a couple of us heard from the Youth Commission the night before, and I think that in this situation, and I know that I should say this to all of you, that if you have questions about what you can do at the town meeting, if you're a town meeting member, in terms of that motion from the floor and an amendment, Melissa offered to explain that and to kind of be a resource, to be supportive to somebody if they want that. And I probably need to work with her a little bit more. I did give her a heads up the week before that I knew that this was going to be something that was going to come up most likely. But I didn't know until the night before that people were unhappy about it and there was going to be a motion from the floor. So that was a tricky thing. Gloria?
The other thing too, that I think going forward, we need to be clearer is, obviously we had a different budget than the select board. And it wasn't clear to the town meeting members as to what they were voting on that article. So I think going forward, when we open up that budget article, we need to just make it very clear that what it is they're going to be approving or not approving. And I still don't agree necessarily that the select board's budget should be the one that is, that the town meeting members are voting on.
And I am going to be following up and doing some more research on that. I do disagree with that, but I need to find out more about why. I was under the impression that it was the finance committee's budget. This came up in one of our rounds in previous years, and we asked the question. I remember Mike brought it up and asked the question. But I just have to go back. I haven't had time to go back and find the reference on that, but I will, because I agree with you, Gloria.
Town council had given us some kind of write-up afterwards, because I had inquired, and still I find it vague. So that's all.
Yeah, I agree. Bob and then Beppy.
Yeah, Greg, is this the first time that there's been a different budget from the finance committee versus the select board?
The answer is no.
Okay.
It's been a while. It's been a while.
All right.
Succinct.
Okay.
Beppy?
Well, another comment that was raised, and it doesn't have to do with the finance committee, was by Fred Dabney asking about the police department, or what are we doing about that? And what it says to me, and I'm just going to ask the question, because across the country, people are looking into how resources are being allocated towards police versus others. And what I did like about that discussion at the town meeting was some people said we don't have to do what others, and we have X number of police officers. I'm using the police. I probably shouldn't, but it's an easy one. We have so many police officers because that's the standard. And I do want to try to where is the who has the responsibility is really what I'm trying to understand for looking into what so many other towns and cities are looking into, which is how we allocate resources towards public safety and how we monitor, can I say, and as a person who has a Black friend who's been stopped in this town for just driving, how do we monitor that kind of thing? And I don't know, that's not all finance, but some of it is finance committee. And I want to know who does that job? Who is looking at how we deal with race relations and ensure that we are allocating our resources to things that are going to be good for all people in the town? A question.
It's a big question, and Sean's not here, and I think it's a question that probably needs to at least start with the select board and the town administrator in terms of the monitoring. I myself, just as a personal question, have been in touch with the chief of police to ask a couple questions, and I probably will follow up. And he has indicated that he's open to those conversations if they come up. But I think in past years, I know I had a concern about gender equity, and I asked a question of the previous chief of police about, why aren't more women? I had known somebody that had applied who was a woman and was not hired, and who knows what went into that. But I was concerned that was also being looked at and didn't get a good answer. So I'm not sure if that information is being reviewed, but I think
Just to follow up, I mean, it would be, maybe we have to wait until Sean joins us so we can, I just want to know how to
Sean
deal with
won't be
these
here
particular
tonight.
issues.
Just-
Greg?
Sean will not be here tonight.
Okay, but I'm just saying, how should we, would you just do it as citizens, or do we do it as, is there something the committee can do? I'm just trying
I
to get a
don't think
sense.
that the finance committee has a specific role or responsibility for that, but I do think that we need some guidance in priorities and kind of triaging what's important, and we don't have that right now because we've asked for that. Brian?
Well, this is where I was listening to people speak. This is where I was going with it. We had no framework to hang anything around
Right.
in terms of long-term goals, medium goals, short-term
Nope.
goals. And therefore, it's very difficult when the questions you've been asking to talk about what the town priorities are, and let alone measure progress against those priorities.
Yeah.
So,
And I've been thinking maybe it's the charter committee that would do that. I'm not so sure that that's the case. I'm not sure that that's the way to
well, I
go.
mean, we need that 10-year plan, but I mean, I've sat through these things, and the
Mhm.
way they're conducted, I don't think you're going to wind up with something.
Yep. So I think we have to give that some thought. I do think, and I think that in under the heading of what's important and what's not, I think that that would be part of our role. And then I
Well,
think,
I mean, even your point of gender equity, that should be in a 10-year plan. And then
Yep.
if you,
Yep.
or whatever, the 5-year plan or whatever the heck. it
well,
is.
and I'm sure, people have a lot of ideas about what's important, and we don't have those goals. We don't have that.
And I'll just be quiet after this. I found it very disappointing, the
Yeah.
whole thing, only because I think there's so much data and there's so much information that, and people can't they can't get a grip on what's important. Like there should be like 4 or 5 different things that the town should be pushing for that fall in line with the budget. And I think it's just too much random data, numbers for people to get involved with.
Well, and there's a lot of reacting, when you
Yeah,
think about
reacting.
the whole issue of, it's just a lot of reacting. So I think we have some more work to do in that area for sure. Gloria?
It's part of our role. We can ask or push the select board to come up with some kind of long-term goals.
Yep.
And some strategic planning, and maybe we can be the advocate for that in asking for that.
And I think the timing is right because we're not facing an immediate crisis. We're looking at a crisis in another year or two. And I think the time is right to get ready for that.
Well,
Okay,
I'll just say one more thing. If they say, wait for the 10-year plan, it's not going to happen.
I agree. No, how do other people feel about that?
Oh, I agree, of course. I don't think we're going to wait, but I don't think that that's the situation we'll end up being in. I think if, Terry, you ask the select board for a plan, be it 5 years, I'm sure that they will work towards that.
Mhm. I hope they will.
Yeah, I mean,
What?
they've done, the town has set some priorities. Being a green community was one of them.
Yep.
Saving a lot of land is one of them. So I wouldn't say that, there's no direction. But, we do need a future direction. I just think the way this town is built is you have like kingdoms and, everybody has their kingdom and it's hard, as I found out, to make any kind of changes. And it's a lot different from the corporate world. And I always remember this situation when in the 80s, I worked for a company that had there was a leveraged buyout of my company, and interest rates were very high, and they borrowed money to buy the company. And they came in to me and they said, listen, you have 11 people reporting to you. You now have 9 people. And, I had to come up with a way to do everybody's job with 9 people, and I found a way. And in town government, that kind of concept of becoming more efficient and trying to reduce headcount does not exist. And
No.
and I don't think we can change it.
No, I would disagree. I think there are other towns that do manage to move forward on items around break down silos. So I would disagree. But, I think the problem is that you need somebody working on it on a constant basis. You can't just dip in and out on a monthly basis like we do.
Yeah, but I mean, I've been on the finance committee 3 years, and every year, everybody comes in with level budgeting, every single year. And usually somebody makes a plea to add additional people. And I think the finance committee's done a pretty good job with select board of holding full-time equivalents down. But I just don't see where, if there's another town that does it right, I'd like to know that information. But I just don't see it in Dartmouth where there's any incentive or want to reduce those kingdoms.
I'm not sure that the finance committee is able to do that. I would have hoped that the select board would, if there were, and I think the select board relies on us to do the detail work that we do, but I think we have to work together with them. And I think there's room for improvement for sure in both of those areas. Gloria?
So in reviewing the minutes, thank you, Greg. They said that 2020 was a charter review year. So is that still happening? Maybe some of this could be addressed.
And for the select board on Monday, they discussed it during Monday select board meeting.
It won't be an elected charter committee though, because they're not looking at changing anything about town government, right? It's going to be an appointed committee. Is that correct, Greg?
I think they were discussing options at the meeting.
Okay, they didn't take a vote on it. Okay.
Terry, before you start, I've been trying to, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I'm fine. I was having trouble screen share. There was something I wanted to share later in the meeting, and the
Okay.
DCTV guy got it working now. Thank you.
Yeah, one other thing about the town meeting, I guess we can go on. I was surprised marijuana didn't pass.
Me too.
Yeah, that was.
Me too.
And I think that was emotional. And I think that I think Dave Talabon did a great
I agree.
advocacy job for it. And I think and it was a tight, it was a tight vote, right? Was it like
I don't know what the count was.
84? I think it was like 86 to 84 or something.
But it
Was
had to be 2/3, right? Because it was a zoning change, so it was not even
Correct.
More
close.
than that. Yeah.
It was something like 96 to 90 or something. It wasn't it was very close.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
not surprised. I'm not
Yeah.
surprised based on what we experienced last year and the voices that we heard last year at town meeting that were opposed to it. So
But last year, I felt like the fact that there was a last minute amendment, the fact that we were actually meeting on that amendment at the meeting, it was really confusing. And because they were looking at potentially changing the process by turning it over to the select board, there are a lot of reasons I think last year that I wasn't comfortable making the change. But this year it was very clear what it was just, I think it was an emotional reaction to the topic more than anything. So we'll see what happens. All right. Yep, Peppy.
When we met with the select board and with Brian's memo, et cetera, we did talk about a process going forward. And that's when I think David's, I can never say his name, said he'd like to be part of it. And I'm still optimistic about that process and trying to figure out what that will be. Yeah. And are we assuming we are going to still have that going forward?
We are. I mean, I haven't heard. We need some information from Greg, which we don't have yet. But
yep.
Why don't we jump to that topic?
Can I ask one other thing? Just because I also read, and maybe this is inappropriate, but I read that Sean was up for a job at another town, and I don't know if that's still a possibility. It's not a possibility anymore.
No,
so
he didn't get it.
Okay, thank you. That just helps. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. I know some news you learn from Dartmouth Week. So, all right. So, anything else on the town meeting? We're good with that. Okay. So let's talk about the current situation. We had talked about having some information from Greg that said 5%, 10%, 20%. There's also a PowerPoint that went out to some people, I think, who asked for it. I'm not sure if everybody got it. Did you, the guy who talked about the potential situation from the state? I'll send it out again after the meeting, just so that if you want to look at it. It's not particularly relevant to Dartmouth because it was more from us, and there's so many unknowns also. But one thing we had been waiting on was to find out what the situation was with this quarter collection of real estate taxes. Do we know that information, Greg?
Well, in terms of real estate taxes, the last we looked at the data, we were only about 100,000 off what we typically would be taking in. And keep in mind, that was impacted by the fact that we allowed people to, oh, you frozen. Okay. We've allowed people to, the deadline for the taxes was June 1st, not May 1, as it typically is.
Yep.
So the data in terms of tax levy collections has to date been promising. We'll have to find out at the end. When people don't pay their taxes, we put out demand notices, and it's probably at that point we're going to see who may or may not pay. But based on the data in terms of who pays on time, it was promising. So once again, I don't believe that is our major worry. I'm more worried about state aid, and I'm more worried about local receipts. The amount of information that has been provided to us by the state has been marginal. I've been told, literally our local representative told me he had no idea what will occur, and we probably will not begin to get a definitive idea until perhaps as late as August. In terms of local receipts, there's a delay between when the receipts are collected and when they're provided to the town. We do not collect hotel, motel, and meals tax. It's all collected by the state. They pay it in quarterly payments, and there's a delay between when they pay it and when they collect it. So we have yet to see the impact of the COVID period really in any way. I did, however, if I can put on the screen, want to show you some of the scenarios that could occur. You mind me putting it on the screen?
Nope, go right ahead. Yep.
Okay. All right, wow, it's a lot quicker than it used to be for me. So I apologize if this looks really small, but this here is, now keep in mind what I'm assuming is we use the 5-year running average of local receipts. I have explained in the past that we basically assume 100% in terms of property tax. We assume whatever the state's going to give us in terms of state aid, and the variable, the big variable for us is the local receipts, where we tend to be very conservative in our estimates. So what I'm showing here, do you see the arrow that I'm moving?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so that number there is showing the 5-year average of the local receipts. It is not showing what we used to base our budget on. It's showing the 5-year average. So if you go to the next page here, you will see that with this reflects the budget approved at town meeting. We have an excess of local receipts of $1,863,975. That's money that, assuming the revenue estimates are accurate, that's money that would go into undesignated fund balance and eventually into free cash. This number here, the next one is 22. You can see this is 672,885. So keep in mind, I'm making assumptions on contractual settlements for 22. The contracts for, well, there have been contracts approved. DTA is only for 1 year. And additionally, the school number, it can vary quite significantly from what one estimates. So I want to stress these are estimates. But in any case, you're seeing in 22, 672,885. So that's all very good. This, though, assumes basically level funding from the state, level local receipts based on the 5-year average, new growth at 600,000. Now I have a 5% cutback scenario. The 5% cutback scenario, I'll go right down to the bottom line here. Here we're looking at in 21, we continue to have an excess of 654,375. However, in fiscal 22, we're in the negative. We're at
Greg, is that a 5% cutback on just the state funding, or is it across the board?
It's a 5% cutback on the new growth. That
Okay.
my assumption of new growth is 600,000 per year.
Okay,
It's a cutback on the Chapter 70 and other state aid, as you can see here.
yep.
It's a cutback on the 5-year running average of local receipts by 5%.
So that's a sort of modest assumption. Don't you, do you
Yes.
agree? Okay, thank you.
Yes, so we have here, so what I'm showing though is with a 5%,
Good.
we do run, the good news is we're okay in fiscal 21. 22, as I've stated repeatedly, is where you start to run into some issues. Now, here's a 10% cutback.
Before you go to 10%, Greg,
What?
before you go to 10%, did you, the real estate taxes are not gonna go down, they're gonna go up 2.5%, right? I mean, the regular, real estate taxes that everybody pays. So is that factored into that?
I'm assuming no, I am assuming no reduction in real estate taxes. I'm assuming that the real estate will go up by the 2.5%.
Okay.
And that, again, we will have new growth, but it will be at 5% reduction from what we typically estimate. So
Okay, thank you.
I'm not, the only thing I'm assuming in terms of taxes that will decline is new growth, which is a positive. I'm just assuming less of that positive.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Greg, before you go on to the other two scenarios, number one, can you email this to me so I can send this to people?
Oh, yes, certainly.
So they can look at that. They might not be able to look at it now.
Okay, 1 second here.
But the other question that I have is, when you were talking earlier, are you saying that the next time that you're going to have an idea of where we stand fiscally is August?
I'm being told by state officials that it probably will not be until August that we begin to have a clear picture of where the state is in terms of what they may provide to us in terms of state aid.
Okay.
So in any case, I have been given, based on that presentation that Terry spoke of, Mike Rodrick's, who happens to be the Ways and Means Chair of the Senate, which is a very influential committee when it comes to setting the budget and local aid, indicated it could be all the way from a level funded scenario to a 20% cutback. He indicated that he did not see any increase from the year before. Remember, the governor originally provided a budget that was a slight increase for Dartmouth, but he felt the best we could do would be level. But he went into great detail to talk about a lot would depend on two major factors. One, how much the state would use of its rainy day fund, and two, how much, whether the federal government would be providing any assistance to the state and localities. And obviously the other variable is how severe the downturn is. So part of the problem here.
There's another variable, Greg, there's another variable also in that guidelines came out today about opening school, and we heard from the school committee on Saturday the thought that it's going to be more expensive, not less expensive, to open school in the fall. And it looks, I saw a headline, but I haven't looked to see where this money's coming from. But the governor is saying there's going to be $200 million for schools to cover COVID-19 expenses. If they're looking at increasing, that's one of the biggest budgets we have. So that could also be a concern. So what I want to get to, not that this, I think we have to go back to this, but I think we also have to decide as a finance committee, are we going to meet this summer to start talking about, so social day is one of the issues that I know is still hanging. They're not collecting revenue. Are we going to make any recommendations about that? And then other priorities that may come up. I haven't heard anything from the select board in terms of their interest in addressing this issue right now. I have to follow up with them to see. But we had talked about meeting a couple times over the summer. If you're not going to have any more information until August, that's a concern for me.
Well, we are going to, there is actions being taken. I don't want to discuss them in any details since they're still internal, but there are actions being taken with Social Day to address that issue. But
So
yes,
those
I
decisions
cannot
are made.
guarantee I will have much more information in July than I have now.
Okay.
But again, getting back to what I was saying, part of the problem is that the federal government has not provided the states and localities a lot of direction, and in turn
Really?
that it filters down. I should state, and this is important, as part of the CARES Act, the $3 million was allocated to the town of Dartmouth. That can only be used toward COVID-related expenditures. So far, our COVID-related expenditures have been relatively negligible. We just received from that 3 million, it's actually like 3,025,000. We received a disbursement of 23,000. Keep in mind, we can't apply for stuff. We're already getting grants elsewhere. So we got a USDA grant, the schools did. We got a grant for the Board of Health, and also FEMA is expected to provide certain monies. But our hope is, of that 3 million, if there are school costs directly related to COVID, in other words, they're caused by COVID, we can apply those expenditures against the 3 million. So that is extremely important.
Yeah.
What the state and others are hoping is that the federal government will go one step further and allow those COVID monies to be applied against state and local revenue loss. That has yet to occur.
Okay.
So here's the 5% cutback. Now here's 10%. And here's where it starts to get somewhat challenging right off the bat.
Greg, can you explain one more time what you're applying the 10% to on that last page? That page right there.
So I'm applying the 10% or the 5%.
Yeah.
I'm applying it to the new growth, which is, new construction and all.
Yep.
We typically estimate about 600. So I'm taking 10% off 600.
Right.
I'm applying it to the local aid, the state aid, in other words.
Yep.
Is these two numbers down here. So you can see we get significant amounts of state aid. And then I'm applying it to the local receipts.
And the 4 items under the local receipts are part of the local receipts?
Yeah, you can see marijuana, short-term revenue. That's considered to be a form of a local receipt.
Okay, and the bulk of the local receipts is from property taxes?
No, local receipts.
I'm sorry,
local receipts is from, actually about half of it's from motor vehicle
excise
taxes.
taxes. Yeah.
And then it's permits, licenses, meals tax, hotel tax.
So have you thought about going into that number? Because that number is a big number. Have you thought about going into that number and applying a cut to individual items? For example, I can't see excise tax going down 10%, but you can certainly see meal tax going down more than that. Hotel tax more than that, but solar net metering, that's not going to go down 10%. You know what I'm saying? And try to get a more precise number.
At this point, I mean, we have that capability of doing that, but at this point, I have not engaged in that exercise, given
Well, it's just estimates now anyway.
I can't tell you how much meals is going to go down. I can't tell you how much hotel's going to go down. But I would say, however, that motor vehicle is dependent on new car sales. So we are concerned about that. That won't show up until January, though, because that's
Right.
when we have our major commitment.
Is there a breakdown of excise tax, meals tax, hotel, as far as new car sales go?
I have all of that. Yes.
I'm just curious. I mean, at some point, just to take a look at it, because although with car sales are up in general, I think, like just on the economy in the whole, I think. But something like hotels and meals, it seems like would be wiped out for a quarter. It just seems like you're working with the best numbers you have, but it seems like a pretty rough estimate.
It is, and at this point, again, until we get some further direction, I'm only going on rough estimates. But
of course,
in any case, so this here is, again, assuming the 10% cut. I should state that in our conversations to date with state officials, that's the one that most people are saying, at least in terms of state aid, that's the one I would focus most of my energies on. Now, that's not, when they say state aid, that doesn't include the local receipt component, which isn't considered to be state aid. But if you were to have a 10% cutback, in other words, a 10% cutback, not on the levy, but everything else, save the major one being enterprise indirect cost, which is charged to the town, we would be looking at a deficit of $555,000 for this year, and a deficit of 1.852 for fiscal year 22. Now, this is where the hiring freeze comes into play, because while we have budgeted a number of salaries in here, we're not, when you are not appropriating money, I'm sorry, when you are not expending those appropriated monies, that is in fact freeing up money in the budget. So far, we have the number of positions that are being vacated continues to grow to the point where it may start to surpass this 555,000 number. We just lost two major positions recently. No decisions have been made as to fill them or not.
What two positions, Greg?
The development director is retiring and the town clerk has resigned.
Oh,
So the next scenario is a 20% cutback. That is obviously the one that we would be most worried about. And you can see there, if we were to have a 20% cutback, we would be looking at, that's almost $3 million. As I've stated before, with a 20% cutback, I believe we would have to go into the budget of fiscal year 21 and engage in staff reduction. I don't see, there are ways we could use our balance sheet to continue, keep in mind we have monies in the form of unused appropriations. We could tighten budgets, but nevertheless, fiscally prudent would be to begin staff reductions in fiscal 21 with a 20% cutback scenario. The good news is, at least speaking to Mike Rodricks, he doesn't see that as the most likely scenario in terms of state aid. So we're hoping, obviously, that it's not a 20%, but as I've kind of back of the envelope have described, I think if we have a 5% cutback, we need to take no action. We need to be diligent. I think with a 10% cutback, if we do not need to replace the workers that we are losing, I think there's a chance we will be able to balance this year's budget without further cutbacks in the budget. But under a 20%, obviously I'm skipping the 15%, under a 20%, we would have to look at actual major cutbacks in the fall. So, and under all these scenarios, save the level fund scenario, you can see that action would have to be taken in fiscal 22. So again, I know everyone wants certainty. I can't give that certainty. No one I've spoken to can give me that certainty, but my hope is 21, we will be okay, and 20, but we will have to, if the downturn continues, we will have to make some difficult choices and decisions for 22.
Okay, any questions from the committee?
A comment. Thank you, Greg. That was really actually very helpful. I'm just curious. we have a reserve, and I'm not saying you should use it, but what is the thinking about when one would use our rainy day funds? And I don't know what this assumes about using what you're currently projecting for this year's free cash or surplus or whatever, and how much of that will be used up for, I think at one point you were thinking it was going to be about 6 to 9 million, somewhere in that vicinity. And how much of that would be used for capital and how much of it could be used for.
Our goal, well, let me put it, first of all, let me say, none of these scenarios that I spoke of are basing any of they're not based on using any of our
Right.
stabilization or free
Right.
cash. It is a possibility, but the problem there is you get into the whole issue of using non-reoccurring revenue to
Sure.
pay for reoccurring expenditure. The bond rating agencies are likely to look negative on situations where you become dependent on non-reliable sources. I, however, do think that, and again, hopefully we won't have to address it, but if we were in a situation where we were looking at staff reduction, it is my personal feeling that we could justify using either free cash or stabilization monies toward unemployment, because unemployment is not supposed to be permanent. In Massachusetts, it's 39 weeks. Now, mind you, in down periods like the Great Recession, they kept extending that number. But to me, that would be a legitimate use. A crude rule of thumb, we do not put money into an unemployment insurance fund like all municipalities where we do pay as you go. So basically, if we were to lay off someone, we are still responsible for roughly 50% of their pay. So that money would have to come from somewhere, and I think free cash or the stabilization would be appropriate for those monies.
I think the bigger question is, how do we do without these positions? And I think that at some point we're going to have to talk about that because,
Right. They're random.
Right. Any other questions, Brian, and then Jeff?
I have a question. Do we consider furloughing? What impact would that have?
Well, furloughing, the layoffs on furlough, what happens when you furlough is they're still benefit eligible. When you lay off, they are no longer benefit eligible. So if we're believing that we are likely to bring back the employees, then furlough does make more sense than layoff. But you do continue to pay for stuff like healthcare. So and that is expensive.
Your experience, have we ever furloughed folks during the Great Recession or whatever it was?
Well, we have a line item transferred tonight that is an example of that, right? When we have an employee who is called to the National Guard or called to serve, we have to continue to pay. So they're kind of furloughed. Is that true, Greg?
Well, that's a little different. That was we wouldn't have that cost associated because that's just we're not actually, if you lay off someone, you're not paying anything, so you're not, the pension cost goes away, but
okay.
the health care cost does not. But that's different, and that's a legal requirement of the state law.
Okay, Jeff and then Bob. Jeff?
Yeah, Greg, could you explain what happens to the enterprise funds in a situation where the cutback, in the general revenue from what you're talking about? Do the enterprise funds do they get protected, or do they, if they've got employees that they're hiring, how does it impact the enterprise fund?
Well, because the enterprise funds are all self-supporting, decreases in the general fund revenues do not impact them. Obviously, should there be decreases in their revenues, then it could have an impact. And you know, the town does have the ability to subsidize enterprise funds. There's nothing illegal about that. But obviously, if the town itself, the general fund, I should say, is experiencing fiscal stress, its ability to assist the enterprise funds would decline accordingly.
And they've got reserves as well, generally.
Yes. I mean, you know, keep in mind with water and sewer, their deal, you know, that's a commitment bill. I'm not so sure that, again, much as I'm assuming the collections will be pretty steady in terms of property taxes other than new growth, I'm not sure you're going to see a major decline in water and sewer revenue. You could have some, you know, to the degree the economy's down, trash, there could be less trash that's collected. But then again, there will be less disposal cost along with that. As we've described before, the one that's currently, it's a trust fund treated like an enterprise fund. That's the most impacted right now is Social Day, because they're without customers, they have no revenue coming in. We also do have some issues with DCTV, which I don't think are so much economic in terms of an economic downturn, but structural, as more and more people go to streaming and cut the cord, if you will. That can be partially economic, obviously. Their revenues are in gradual decline.
So Bob and then Gloria. Bob?
I'm all set.
Oh, okay. Gloria?
So Greg, the $3 million that was allocated to Dartmouth from the CARES Act, was that based on a submission on the part of the town?
No, this was monies that were given to the state, and each county could have chosen whether or not to take some of those monies and allocate them out themselves, or use the state to allocate them out. I believe there was one county, I think it was Plymouth County, that chose to allocate them out, and the rest delegated that authority to the state. So these were intended for our level of government, and every community was given monies based on, I think, populations. I'm not sure if social economics were also factored in, but all communities were given a pool of money.
So what is your, what would you like to do in terms of proceeding as committee? I'd like to know what suggestions you have about next steps on this topic. Bob?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to hear the school committee, by August 1st, the school committee should know what they're doing. And I'd just like to have them present to us what they're gonna do, because that's the biggest number, and that's probably the one that has the most negative impact. In other words, their costs could go up dramatically. So I'm thinking, you know, just for information, I'd like to have the school committee make a presentation to us on August 1st.
Okay, Brian?
I would like to have more participation by the select committee in our meetings. Because I get the feeling sometimes, based on that town meeting, we're operating in two different worlds. And I would like to have them part of the discussions here on some level, so that we're not wandering off in a direction that they're not particularly interested in, or whatever.
So maybe have a joint meeting where we kind of brainstormed and talked in general about what next steps are. That may make sense.
Yes,
Okay.
or have one or two of them at a meeting, regularly at a meeting that we have.
Okay. Other people? Other thoughts?
Well, I think in following up to that, I do think any way we can get a sense of priorities
Yes.
and other thing, and hearing from the select board, other things that they are considering, because I don't think we're fully informed about, as Greg said, we know about this and something else is happening there. We have to know what's going on, and we do need to know what open positions there are and how the process by which they are considering filling those positions, et cetera.
I do want to state that the select board gets that information from myself and Sean. So keep in mind, they rely on the same information source that you do.
But are they getting that regularly? Like how many positions are open? Do they?
No, but I'm just saying, and they're not going to be able to provide.
Sure, that's fine. That's fine. I get it. Yeah, it's just we have the same. We were talking about what the process is for filling those positions, if there is one.
Yeah.
But by the same token, I think it would be good to have an ongoing discussion about filling positions, not filling
Exactly.
positions, their feelings towards furloughing versus laying people off.
I would ask you though, when you think about other questions like this that have come up, one of the things that I've heard from the select board is that they want to know what not all select board members, but a kind of theme is they want to know what town meeting thinks. And in my opinion, I know that the way that we operate is we meet with people, we take the information, we analyze it, we give it to people with the recommendation that's based on facts. And I'm not sure that I know I got a few emails this year thanking the committee for the cover letter that went with the information, that they were able to learn some things that they didn't know in the past. So I think we need to be prepared for that as a reaction too. But I do feel like having everybody in the same meeting talking about what the priorities are would be useful. Gloria?
I agree. They need to be involved in this. I mean, as decision makers, as elected officials who are probably getting obviously more feedback from the public, what's important for the public, what are some of the priorities there. I mean, that's important information that they could share with us. And then, we just heard about 2 positions today that are, retirement and resignation. Those are positions that are significant and they're going to have to be filled.
Yeah.
So, what's that process going to look like? And then are there any other positions, any other retirements looming or other resignations looming that we need to be aware of?
The environmental affairs officer is retiring in September as well.
We knew about that. He had talked to us about that. And I knew about Deb's position because I heard the meeting Monday night, but I didn't know about the town clerk. So, so a couple,
If I may.
Go ahead,
I'm
Gloria.
sorry, is that, back to the CARES Act, the 3 million, because Greg, you initially started saying that, as of today, there was some grant monies that, were kind of covering some of the COVID expenses, but that the 3 million could be used for schools. Were you thinking the full 3 million?
For COVID related expenses.
Right, COVID related, right. So are you thinking that the entire 3 million could be utilized for COVID related school? Or are we going to have some excess funds that, are going to have to be returned? Is my question.
Well, I'm not, I can't answer that now because I do not have a good idea of the costs that the added costs the schools may incur related to COVID. I can tell you based on what I do know, it is highly unlikely that the town would even come close on the town side, that is, to the 3 million. We have been spending money on, PPE and such, but the cost on that is nowhere near 3 million. Keep in mind, there are programs out there that give us a lot of the products for free. So
We can add that to a question from Jim Lee on the schools, what might work. So I'm seeing two things. One, schedule a meeting, joint board meeting with the select board, ask for a report from the school committee, maybe have a joint meeting with the school committee at some point over the summer. What are people's schedules like over the summer? Are people available in the summer? Are you, in general?
Traveling the
Nobody's
world.
going? Okay. So I'll work with Greg on that. Any other questions on this kind of future planning? Okay, so two questions, Greg, on the town meeting. One is the Article 19. Gloria had asked about that. Do you know what happened with that article and why it didn't come up?
Article 19 is that the flood one?
Yep.
The state changed its position. As you know, we were told that we needed to have it approved no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
And they sent out a memo, not only saying that we didn't need it approved, but don't approve it. So,
Right.
The first question I had was, well, we'll approve it anyways, get it out of the way. But apparently, I have not seen the memo myself. Apparently, the memo specifically said, take no action.
Okay.
So
that answers that question. And Greg, I have a question. Something came up on the water sewer budget. And I know Mr. Hickox presented at the select board meeting on Monday night to explain that the part of the 3% increase was borrowing that needs to be done for new wells and for the water treatment that's being done. And my question is, I looked back on the minutes to see, did we know that? Did we vote on that? Because they were looking for a vote from the select board, and I would think they would want to vote from the finance committee, and I don't find any place that we voted on that.
we're talking in terms of, is this water or is this sewer? Which one are we taking?
Oh, I think it's water, because it was treatment, the water, Mr. Hickok said it was the new wells, the Violetta wells, and it was the treatment of the to address the water violations. And it was the borrowing that was needed was as a result of that work, and that was going to result. Remember, Mr. McDonald asked for an explanation of the 3% increase?
Yeah, I didn't listen that intently to that part.
All right, then leave that, and I'll find that out later.
I can't tell you the debt service for the water actually went down by 200,000 between 20 and 21.
All right.
They are, as part of the capital plan, they are doing a filter rehabilitation of Westport Road plant for 400, but that's using retained earnings.
All right, let's hold on that, then I'll do some more research on that and get back to you. Were there any other questions then on? Oh, okay. So then let's talk for a minute about minutes, because the minutes were great. And I want to ask you what we can do to get these minutes closer to the time that we meet. There's such a great reference, and now we're going to be approving these minutes after the whole season's gone by. I really, if we need to ask if somebody else in your office can be in charge of making sure that they go out. I don't know what's involved in the actual process of getting these done, but they are, in my opinion, a great resource for us. And I would like to have them closer to the time that we're meeting. And I've talked about it before, so now I'm really putting you on the hot seat, Greg, and saying, what can we do?
Well, I think we can do that. I mean, understand that I lost this year. My whole office went remote.
Yeah.
tremendous amounts of time have been spent on issues that I would not nominally.
I don't fault you, and I understand the COVID situation. I really want us to be practical and think about what it is that we can do. I know you have somebody that does them.
Yeah, I have to be more diligent at that, and I think I can be. Again, I was somewhat, this year was an extraordinary year in that there was quite a lot that I could not, I normally don't have to deal with that we had to deal with. So I don't expect next year to be a repeat, and I will make a commitment not to repeat.
They're very, very helpful, Greg. They're so helpful, the information in them from my point of view. I don't have the memory for this, and I did not want to go back and watch every meeting to prepare for the meetings that we have. It's very helpful to have it in writing. Any questions on the minutes that we have tonight? Did anybody find any problems with it? Any?
No, they were very detailed.
Yeah, I like them a lot. You want to vote them can we vote them as a block then, Greg?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Don't we have to make a motion with all the dates on them?
There are 7 of them.
Yep. So it's the minutes of February 20th, February 27th, March 5th, March 12th, April 2nd, April 9th, and April 16th.
I make a motion, we accept the minutes from those dates.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we can do that, Greg? We don't need a roll call?
Actually, I believe all votes are supposed to be roll call. So.
Okay, so Bob made the motion and who seconded it? Janine. Bob?
Yes.
Yes. Gloria? Janine?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Beppy?
Yes.
And Terry, yes. And we're missing 2 joint meetings. Somebody will do those, Greg, the one with the planning board and the one with the select board. And then 5 regular meetings.
Yes, no,
So hopefully
we
we'll
are
have
working on it. As a matter of fact, we will be doing more tomorrow, the minutes clerk, and so I can continue to give you more.
Great. All right, want to move on to the line item transfers. I know I had asked Greg a question before the meeting. I don't like the fact that the youth advocates coming out of the reserve fund, and I want to talk some more about that the next time, but these are all line item transfers, which means they're coming from the programs where the funding was. So it won't affect the reserve fund, just to let you know. And I'll ask Greg to explain. Which one do you want to start with, Greg?
On my computer here, I have Director of Development, so we'll start off with that one.
Okay.
First of all, line item transfers, you take it from available funds in a line item. In all cases, for all 4 line item transfers, I had excess money in debt service for interest on debt. And so I'm taking all the monies that are needed for these budgets out of the debt service. There's an excess of $214,281.44 in that account. Keep in mind, I've told you before, I level fund non-exempt debt. It goes up and down depending on when we're going long term. What I don't want to have is a situation where one year we don't budget because we have availability, and the next year we go long term And when you go long-term, you owe both principal and interest. And we're like, how come we don't have the money? So we level fund. The goal is we spend about 2.5% of our budget on general fund debt service. That is non-exempt, not exempt from Proposition 2.5. So in this case, we had a individual who, the director of development, she had a contract that went through June 30th of 2019. It got renegotiated in November. And as part of that renegotiation, it included a increase in compensation. That was never factored in the budget when we approved the budget back in June of 2019. We can take from the bottom line of each budget, but in the case of the Community Development Department, the only line is the salary. So the amount needed is $2,933.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion?
Oh, and I should state that both the select board and the FinCom have to vote this for this to go through. The FinCom, I'm sorry, the select board will be voting this July 13th. We have until July 15th to approve line item transfers.
It's 2,000 what? What's 2,000 how much?
$2,933.
Okay. Okay, I make a motion to approve the transfer of $2,933 in order to fund the development position in Dartmouth.
Second.
Yeah. Okay.
Who seconded it?
Second.
Thank you, Brian. Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Garvin,
Yes.
Gloria, Janine,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yep.
Brian, Adam,
Yes.
Beppy,
Yes.
and Terry, yes. Thank you very much. Next transfer.
I'm afraid I have to sign off,
Okay, Beppy.
but I approve,
you.
I approve the next transfer. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, the next one I'm going to do is the pension. Now this gets a little complicated, but basically we have not many employees, but we have a few employees who occasionally will go on active military leave. By law, they pay a certain amount toward the pension, the defined pension plan that we all who are 20 hours or more must contribute to. The amount that you contribute toward that, it depends on when you got into the system. But currently a new employee going in would be 9%. And then if after a certain number, I forget the exact number, but 30,000, you pay an additional 2%. So certain employees who entered the system earlier in their career have to pay less. So I, for example, pay 10% above the 30,000 or so since I entered the system back in the 90s. So under state law, the town must pay the contribution that otherwise would be paid by the member for those on active military leave. frankly, I wasn't aware of this law until I got a call earlier this year from Bristol Retirement, who announced that back in 2005, we had a member who, they had a member, one of our employees who went on military leave back then, and never did they charge the town. So they charged the town this year. They did not charge any additional interest, which I would have had a problem with, given it was their oversight, not ours. And the amount that of the additional mandatory assessment is $8,254.58.
Okay, looking for motion. Brian? Second?
Second.
Janine, second? Okay, let's do a roll call. Oh, any questions or discussion on that? Okay, Bob?
Yes.
Gloria? Janine?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
And Terry, yes. Okay, Greg?
All right, the next one I'll do is unemployment. I should state this one has already been voted by the select board. So if you vote it, it will be passed. In this case, we have a budget to pay for unemployment. I mentioned it's a pay-as-you-go. We have there is still a surplus in that budget of $20,183. However, and I made a mistake when I brought this up at the select board meeting. I said the last bill we received was from January. After further review, I corrected to say the last bill we received was from February. We have not received March, April, May, or obviously June's bill. So you're supposed to pay the expenditures of an expense like this in the year incurred. I really can't tell you what they will be in February, March, April, May, or June. I'm sorry, March, April, May, or June, because we have not been billed yet. And as such, even though we have a surplus of 20,000, I was extremely conservative and put 100,000 down. If it turns out we do not need these monies, they will go to undesignated fund balance, as they would if we kept them in the debt service account. I'm hoping, obviously, they're no more than this. We to date have not been laying off our employees. However, one impact is when employees their contracts or such aren't renewed. If they go out onto the market and they can't find other jobs, then it comes back on us. When they find jobs, what we owe is less or even eliminated. So to the degree you have a poor market, whereas in a stronger economy, people might go from us to another job, there'd be no cost to the town. In this case, there can be cost to the town. Very quickly, one interesting thing we're finding right now, I don't know if you read about it, but there are some rackets out there who are taking advantage of the fact that they're giving out the unemployment to COVID related without the same degree of scrutiny. These are foreign entities. The town is finding that we are a victim of that fraud. We have it appears we have multiple employees whose identity has been stolen, and which they're submitting for unemployment in the name of these employees, presumably the state is then paying out these amounts, and then we're getting notices asking for documentation as to their reasons for going on unemployment. Of course, nothing has been done for them. So this is, I don't know if anyone's read about this, but this is actually a national problem. And based on our little town, I think it's probably going to cost in the billions of dollars. Never mind the state, it could be hundreds of millions.
Gloria?
We received a notice from the state last week at work that employers are now being asked to call employees to verify that they in fact did file because of these fraudulent claims.
And that's exactly what we're doing. I just received, I think, about a list of 8 of them. And we're calling up every department head, asking them to call the employers. And I can tell you, based on, we just found a few today, so that were fraudulent.
So you're asking for line item transfer of $100,000
Yes.
in this area. So would somebody like to make a motion?
I make a motion to transfer $100,000 from unemployment expense to debt service.
Second? Bob, seconded. Questions, discussion? Okay, Bob Garvin. Gloria?
Yes.
Janine?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
And Terry, yes. Okay, Greg, we're in the home stretch here. One more.
All right, one more. So this is well, actually the second biggest one. Veterans Services. Here we have a case where how much we pay out is dependent on caseload. Also, the benefit amounts are set by the State Department of Veterans Services. I know that they have been increasing COLAs, and for example, I believe they increased the burial benefit from $2,000 to $5,000. So they've been increasing the cost of the benefit, plus also affected, obviously, is increased caseload. Keep in mind, the caseload does not just include the veterans, but their spouses. These are low, they have to meet certain income criteria to qualify. So this amount here is representative of the deficit in the account. I added in 700 to be safe, but most of it's already incurred as a deficit. We have already increased, if you look in the budget for fiscal 21, you'll notice we did significantly increase the amount for veterans benefits, hopefully up to avoid this need for fiscal 21. I should state, very important, that what we spend, again, it's approved by the Department of Veterans Services. We do receive 75% reimbursement by the state, although not necessarily immediately. You get it the next year. So we're asking for $92,500.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to transfer $92,500 to Veterans Services from debt service.
Thank you, Janine. Second. Brian, seconded. Okay. Bob?
Yes.
Yes. Gloria?
I actually had a
Questions?
question, if I may.
Yes, you may.
So I guess this one just confused me a little bit. I appreciate the fact, Greg, that you mentioned, benefit amounts have increased as well as caseload. But when we've had the gentleman speak to us in the past, he was really clear about how he seeks out, who really would benefit from this and who would fall into that caseload. Was there anything that changed to increase the caseload so much? did they look at a different pool of people? Was there, you know, a list of people that came forward that they didn't have before? Because he seemed like he was doing such diligent work. So I know we have a new person now in this position. So I was just wondering what happened.
First, let's state that we had an overage in 19. So we were already under budget in 19. We went, I believe in 19, we did two, actually. We did 21,000 and we did, I guess maybe we just did 21,000. So we had an overage, but by the time we were cognizant of that, we had already voted the fiscal 20 budget. So I think part of it has to do with we've been under budgeting now for a few years. And then, as I said, additional benefit costs combined with perhaps more beneficiaries. I can't tell you if he's doing anything different. I personally think that the bulk of it has to do with, again, we just haven't, the number of people has not gone down like we were anticipating. And again, the benefit costs have been going up.
Any other questions? Okay, then Gloria, what's your vote?
Yes.
Janine,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Adam,
Yes.
and Terry is yes. Okay, and that concludes our work for tonight. I'll be in touch with you for a couple of potential dates for the meetings that we talked about a little bit earlier. And if there's any other information that Greg has, I'll forward it to you. Thank you very much. Nice to see you all. Who would like to make a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Gloria, all in favor? Let's do a hand raise. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Right.
Good night. Have a good one.
Right.